All right, so talking about some HR legislation here. Um, so there's been tons and tons and tons of legislation that's been passed over the years, and kind of I'll highlight some of the more important ones that you probably need to know. And so the first one here is the Fair Labor Standards Act, 1938. That's the law that established minimum wage and overtime. Okay, so it says that you have to you have to pay at least a minimum amount of money, and if you're an hourly employee, you have to pay extra if they work over 40 hours a week. Okay, so the next one that's important is probably the Equal Pay Act in 1963. Said that men and women who do equal jobs with equal qualifications must be paid the same wage. All right, and that's even today. There's discrepancy on whether that actually happens or not. There's research that tends to show that women still get paid less than men. It's really hard to figure out what a good comparison is between two people, because rarely do you have two people that have the same qualifications and in the same exact positions to compare their wages. But there does seem to be some sort of discrepancy still. Civil Rights Act of 1964, which we talked about when we talked about selection, says that you're prohibits discrimination based on sex, race, color, religion, and national origin. Set up two different types of discrimination. You should know those. One is called disparate impact. The other is called disparate treatment. And you should know what those two mean. Age Discrimination in Employment Act, the ADEA, said that. So it turns out that what was happening is people over the age of 40 tend to be our highest paid workers because they have the most seniority. They also tend to start using more health insurance, which costs more money. So, highest paid, more money, strike one. More health insurance, higher money, more cost, strike two. And then, actually, when you start getting older, you tend to become a little bit less productive. Less productivity costs more money, strike three. And so we people were requiring them to mandatory retire. So they had ages at which, okay, once you hit this age, you're just done working here. And so and then you were having a hard time getting a job anywhere else because nobody wanted to hire older workers. So we have a law that says that you're not allowed to discriminate against people over the age of 40. Let's see. Americans with Disabilities Act prohibits against people who have disabilities. It's interesting here that you don't actually have to have a disability. If you're perceived as having a disability, you're protected under the Americans with Disabilities Act. It says that you have to provide a reasonable accommodation. So, for example, let's say here at Blinn College, let's say Blinn did not have elevators, and I got a job here, and Blinn would have to figure out, even though all of my coworkers and my boss is on the second floor, and if I'm in a wheelchair, Blinn would have to figure out how to reasonably accommodate me so I could do the job. All right, and installing an elevator is not a reasonable accommodation. All right, it would likely be unreasonable based on the cost that would for me to require them to put an elevator in. Now, what they could do, and it would require a little work, but they could find me an office and on the first floor, and they could schedule all my classes on the first floor, and then I'd be able to do my job. So that the Americans with Disabilities Act is what provides that protection and requires that accommodation. The last one that you need to really know is the Civil Rights Act of 1991. So this is really an amendment to 1964 Civil Rights Act, because it didn't talk about they didn't really talk about too much what sexual harassment looked like, which is really just sexual discrimination. And so they hashed that out in 1991 and kind of expanded so that it was clear on what that would be. And so what that is sexual harassment, unwelcome sexual advances in the workplace. However, there's actually two types of sexual harassment, and no, it is not verbal and physical, okay? What it is one's called quid pro quo. That means this for that, all right? In other words, it's saying, all right, if you do something for me, let's say you want an A in this class, and you don't currently have an A, and you come and you see me, and I say, well, I'll give you an A if you do a sexual favor for me. That would be quid pro quo harassment. Hostile work environment is when the environment's made so hostile that you're not able to adequately work and do your job. And that could be from, in this case, it's sexual harassment based on jokes, comments, even touching. And so, interesting thing about hostile work environment is that it doesn't actually have to be directed at you. Let's say we actually met in class, and you came to class, and I was talking to someone on the opposite side of the room, had nothing to do with you, you just overheard it. That could start to work towards creating this hostile work environment. Now, they're going to look at a couple things. One's pervasive, and the other one's strong. So one little incident's probably not going to be hostile work environment. However, if it's a regular, constant thing, and it doesn't ever stop, and possibly you even mentioned that you're uncomfortable, although that's not necessarily a requirement, then it could be, because it's pervasive, it's continually happening. Strong would be, you came in one time and someone grabbed you. Either, let's say someone grabbed your breast, and that could be, that would likely be sexual harassment, just from one incident, because it's a really strong incident in that case. Anyway, so that's sexual harassment and the Civil Rights Act of 1991. And that's it for the HR laws.